First steps in the higher life. Step 2, self-indulgence. From James Allen's book, Out from the Heart, my name is Stephen Van Eiderstein, and welcome to the narrowing path, walking the spiritual walk. Thank you all for joining me again as we continue to go through this chapter from James Allen's book, Out from the Heart. Absolutely redefining chapter, actually, if you take the words of wisdom that he offers here and follows the steps that are outlined in this book. So this is a mass market reprint you can get, I believe, off Amazon. This is the copy I will be reading out of. I think it's from around 1914. This book was originally published in 1904. And I feel like that's really relevant, actually, to continue to reference, because the stuff we're going to be talking about, especially today, there's no science to back up what he wrote about 120 years ago, which was just mainly common sense stuff to him back then, which I find very interesting, right? It seems like we've, I've said it before on this podcast, but I feel like we've lost our way a little bit with some of these ideas and concepts. Like we knew something that we lost along the last 100 years. And I'm really happy to be going through this for my own personal growth and for just preserving the information and putting it out there for other people to follow. So the first step that we did last week was indolence. And this was the first step of 10 that he outlines. And it was also the first step in the discipline of the body, which is the first lesson, right? So we did the first step of the first lesson in the discipline of the body. And we will be doing the second step listed, which is the second step in the discipline of the body. And it is self-indulgence, which is for a self-aggrandizing, self-obsessed society. Self-indulgence is quite relevant today. That is for sure. So I wanted to thank everybody for following along, and the follows and the subscribers, the likes, and all of the interaction you guys are giving me on the posts. I really do appreciate it. And I'm really happy to see this information's getting out there. So I'm looking forward to getting into the second step. So let's go ahead and we'll do the main reading and we'll go from there. So here we go. This is from James Allen's Out from the Heart, the chapter, First Steps in the Higher Life. And this is his second step outlined for us to practice to grow, begin our journey to grow spiritually. The next step is the overcoming of self-indulgence or gluttony. The glutton is he who eats for animal gratification only without considering the true end and object in eating, who eats more than his body requires and is greedy after sweet things and rich dishes. Such undisciplined desire can only be overcome by reducing the quantity of food eaten and the number of meals per day, and by resorting to a simple and uninvolved dietary. Regular hours should be set apart from meals, and eating at other times should be rigidly avoided. Suppers should be abolished, as they are altogether unnecessary, and conduce to heavy sleep and cloudiness of mind. The pursuit of such a method of discipline will rapidly bring the hitherto ungoverned appetite under control, and as the sensual sin of self-indulgence is taken out of the mind, the right selection of food will be instinctively and infallibly adapted to the purified mental condition. It should be well borne in mind that change of heart is the needful thing, and that any change of diet which does not subserve this end is futile. Whilst one eats for enjoyment, he is gluttonous. The heart must be purified of sensual craving and gustatory lust. Relevant? I believe so. Extremely relevant for our society in general, my society, the country I'm in. I don't know. I think the world overall, this applies to in a lot of ways. This is extremely relevant for this, for what we're going through today. Excuse me. And it's also extremely relevant for my own personal journey. But so many people today, especially in the Western world, have weight problems. They have weight-related health problems. And a lot of it, and all of it, is due to self-indulgence. So this is a very telling chapter. This is a very timely step to be reading, especially in my own personal journey. I like my food. We as a society, we like our food. We like our sugary drinks, our carbs, our fast foods. We like our rich desserts and our large portions, and we like decadence. We like this deep and rich flavor, and it's when you think about it, it's almost intoxicating. You know, there's people out there that have food disorders, eating disorders, because they can't stop overeating. They use it for comfort. They use food for all the for all the wrong problems, and they need to right their relationship with food. There's so many out there that have an issue with this. And this is honestly a problem I face myself, though to not an extent many do. This is something I'm actively working on, and I've gotten a lot better at it, if I'm honest. But it's something that I find myself gravitating to. I like sugary desserts. I like brownies and cookies and cakes and all of that stuff. I like sodas. I like sweet coffees. Even though I drink my regular coffee black, I still really enjoy those mochas and the vanilla lattes and things like that. And it's really terrible. Those things are terribly unhealthy for me. And as a society at large, in as a whole, we have a very big problem with this. We have a very big problem with overeating and eating unhealthy things. It's just a fact of the Western world today. And this is something that many that, like myself, when we get into recovery, we find ourselves putting on weight, overeating, being gravitating towards sugary foods and sweet foods and carbs and things like that, because they serve a purpose, especially for those with alcoholism as the problem and drinking as a problem. You know, everything in alcohol, it breaks down to sugar. So our body craves something to replace it. So, which can be a problem if not appropriately regulated and appropriately addressed. Though in the beginning, a lot of people say it's nothing you got to worry about, which honestly, most of the time I am in that boat as well. But at some point, there's something to be said about monitoring that and making sure you're healthy, right? Making sure you're not just replacing one addiction for another addiction, right? Because it's really easy to fall into that, actually. It's really easy to pick that up as a replacement because it tastes good and it hits all the right brain receptors and it releases all the right chemicals. And, you know, we can struggle with that very much. And it was something that I found that I turned to during times of high stress. After I got into recovery and I got sober, I pursued a master's degree. I pursued an associate's, a bachelor's, and then a master's degree. So I was in school for 5 years of my recovery. And food was something I gravitated towards. And honestly, it's a common stress reliever for many people. And it's so unhealthy to view it as such, to view it as a comfort thing, to view it as a stress reliever, to view it. People view eating certain foods as a self-care. Like, oh, I get to reward myself. I get to have this sweet thing because I've done X, Y, and Z. And I know now that it's the same. That's the same thinking as a drink or a drug, which is kind of crazy to truly realize that I treat food the same way I would treat substances. But I was lucky enough to notice and not divert, but to address it for the most part. I won't say I did it perfectly. I gained some weight during school. I gained some weight when I got into recovery, but it was something that I saw and I began to address, partially because of these types of readings and this type of information that was squirreled away from in a book 120 years ago. And but I've seen plenty of people not address it, that justify it for a little bit of time, and then they have a really difficult time actually correcting the behavior, right? They've picked up really unhealthy behaviors when it comes to food, all based around self-indulgence and gluttony. And I know it might be an unkind way to phrase it. It might be an unkind way to say it, but sometimes we need to say it plainly, right? And it's also important that this step is the second step too, because the first step gives us some more structure and a different way to actually live and go throughout the day. And without that, we can't actually implement this step, because we'll get into it later on how the structure of the day actually is quite important to addressing our self-indulgent ways, right? Because we need to have certain time set aside for eating and this and thus. But so it makes a whole lot of sense to me why indolence was the first thing, because it helps you develop the discipline of doing things regardless of your opinion of them, like we talked about last week. And when we get that addressed, then we can actually address other things that we don't want to address, or other things that might be more difficult for us to address. So the discipline gets started in this first step for our bodies, and then we're able to deepen it and reinforce it in this second step, and really begin to make significant changes in our lives. Actually, if you just do these first two steps, your outward life will change significantly. Actually, when you think about it, these first two steps are, to be fair, are usually the steps where people stop if they're doing anything. They'll focus on these external behaviors, they'll focus on these actions that they're taking, but they won't actually go steps further into the way they're thinking, or into the ultimate change, which is the change of heart regarding these behaviors, which the heart inspires the thoughts of the mind, and the mind then takes action, whether it's physical action or words or whatever it might be. So it's really important that this was the second step and definitely not the first, because the first gives us just a good head start to be able to address this. Now, let's go ahead and read this first part here. And it says the first line, I believe, in this paragraph, the next step is the overcoming of self-indulgence or gluttony. The glutton is he who eats for animal gratification only, without considering the true end and object in eating, who eats more than his body requires, and is greedy after sweet things and rich dishes. I have to say, when I read this for the first time, I don't even remember how long ago it was, how many years ago it was, to be honest with you. But that word, glutton, it was difficult for me to accept that. It was something I didn't want to actually accept and wanted to reject. But when it was written so plainly here, when James Allen gave us this definition of what a glutton was, it was hard for me to actually deny that was not true. Deny that it wasn't true. To deny that I was a glutton, because he gave a description, right? Eats for animal gratification only, without considering the true end and object of eating, who eats more than his body requires and is greedy after sweet things and rich dishes. That pretty much describes my eating habits. It described them. It still does on some days. This is something I am still actively working on. I wish I could tell you that I've executed it perfectly, but I would definitely be disingenuous if I said that. But I have to say, this first part of it was very difficult to actually just own the fact that definitionally I was a glutton. And it's because like so many words, there's this heaviness to it. There's this stigma that's associated with it. There's the shame that's associated with gluttony and to be a glutton. And some might say rightfully so. Some might say it's intentionally that way. And I honestly I'll be a little bit transparent with you about my past. It was similar to the first time I got called a junkie. And someone called me a junkie for the first time because I was an IV heroin using drug addict. So I used needles and injected it straight into my veins. And sacrificed jobs and relationships and things to it. Now, that made me fulfill the meaning of that word, junkie. And that stung so badly when it happened for the first time. That stung in such a way that I couldn't describe because it was such a humiliating word to accept. And it was that way because there was truth to it. It was hard for me to accept that because there was truth to it. And it described me. Not only did the word carry shame in my mind, but I had shame about what I was doing and who I had become and the way I was acting. So when I hear this glutton word, the same thing, maybe a little bit lesser extent, but overall the same thing occurred. There was this sting to it. There was this, really? Me? No, it couldn't be me. Then I read it again, and I struggled with it for a while because it's nothing I wanted to acknowledge as a problem, or it's nothing that I wanted to acknowledge as an issue, or want to agree that label would be something that my behaviors would warrant. The eating for animal gratification only, without considering the true end and object in eating. He eats more than my body requires. Greedy after sweet things and rich dishes. Now, I did all of those things, though. Like, there's a certain level of honesty that has to come with this when we say, do you have a problem with eating things that only give you this sense of satisfaction, whether it's certain flavorings, whether it's certain sugary things, whether it's carbs, whether it's, I don't even know. Salt even can be addictive, right? Certain cheeses can be, well, I think all cheese has sugar in them actually, but those are addictive. So I would eat when I wasn't hungry because it made me feel good. It would make me feel as though like I was feeling better. You know, I was using it for all the wrong reasons. I could medicate myself with food and sugary drinks, right? So that's animal gratification, is it not? A sense of pleasure, a sense of satiation and satisfaction that gave me a sense of comfort. I did that. I ate when unnecessary because I was stressed or I was bored or I just was contemplating something and mindlessly eating. I've done that too. I've eaten because I felt like I should eat because what happens if I get hungry later? So I wasn't actually hungry. I wasn't actually in need of sustenance, but I did it anyway because it was there and expected in some capacities. And that last part too, right? This is greedy after sweet things and rich dishes. Just, yeah, the intensity to flavor, the depth of flavors, right? Like there's something so, like I said, intoxicating about that. And I know to some who don't struggle with this, but I do think everyone does to some extent. This might sound weird, but it's almost intoxicating to think of like eating a really good meal and how it's going to make you feel, right? Or eating the comfort food and justifying it because you had a hard day. Or just eating sweets, your favorite cookies, your favorite brownies, whatever it might be, or your favorite soda. You just feel like you can't relax until you have that drink. And I'm not even talking about alcohol, though it all sounds the same as alcohol. So I had to go through those, and I had to do that with some honesty with myself. And when I did that, guess what? I came to the realization I was a glutton, right? I was a junkie. I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was a glutton. Now, a lot of people say, oh, don't use such negative words, such highly stigmatized words. Now, I do understand why people would say that, because things can have so much shame and guilt around them, and that people it has such a negative impact on some people. But there's some, if it's true, then maybe it should sting. If it's true, maybe you should feel the weight of that stigma for a little while. Because if it's true for you, that means you have a problem you need to address. You can't avoid the shame because it's within you. You carry it within you. If I wasn't an IV using heroin addict and I was perfectly sober and someone looks at me and would have called me a junkie, or would have called me a crackhead, would have called me anything, all of these derogatory terms, it wouldn't affect me. The shame those words actually draws out of you is shame that's already within you. So when you find a word that really tugs at you, really causes some conflict and negative emotion within you, it's your responsibility to take a look at that, because a word is only a word, right? We give the word the power. We really do. And I don't think these words should be avoided. I don't think the word glutton should be avoided. I don't think you should try to define it another way or try to find another word to placate your inner shame about it, because it's still going to be there. You're not solving anything. If this describes you, I fully encourage you to own it, because what is acceptance but recognizing the honest truth about having an issue of some sort, right? Coming back to reality to actually be present to address something. Now, that might not feel good. You might be embarrassed of it. You might have shame around it, but that's where you've got to start. That's where I've had to start with this stuff. And when you own it and you address it and you work on it and you're actively improving it, suddenly the shame lifts. Suddenly the shame is no longer there. Suddenly you realize that you were only doing those things because it served a purpose for you. And living a different way means it doesn't have to serve that purpose anymore. So all of the power is in actually owning that word. It's in actually owning the fact that, hey, I have gluttonous behavior. I am a glutton, right? When I was a junkie, someone called me a junkie, and I accepted it. Not because it changed who I was, but it was an honest description and portrayal of my behaviors at that time. I don't know if everyone's going to like my perspective on that, to be honest with you. But I will not be scared of word anymore. I will not run from something that evokes shame within me. because that shame is growth. That shame is progress. That shame is opportunity to me today. And I take it, I own it, I look at it. That's where my strength lies. That's where my power lies. It's just uncomfortable to go through. It's uncomfortable to grow through. But I encourage you, don't run from these things. Don't be ashamed of these things. Don't play the mental gymnastics of trying to rephrase things in such a way you find it acceptable so it doesn't touch the shame in your heart over things you know are wrong. Because that's the only way it exists, is because you know it is wrong. And you need to take a look at it. So don't be scared to engage with uncomfortable truths and realities anywhere in your life. So, but after you can admit this problem, he starts giving us a little bit of these solutions here. He says, such undisciplined desire can only be overcome by reducing the quantity of food eaten, the number of meals per day, and by resorting to a simple and uninvolved dietary. Now, this doesn't sound unfamiliar to me. This doesn't sound something so radically off base, and it sounds like things we hear about today. Actually, this is the solution that Alan presents to us, to our gluttony and our self-indulgence, are things that today we are studying in modern science and technology, and we are verifying that this stuff is true, right? It's just interesting to me that he referenced a lot of solutions here that people already talk about. Like, this is common sense stuff. Even 120 years ago, they might not have had all of this science to back it up, but there's observational truth about what he was talking about. There's experiential truth about what was talking about, right? So there's a deeper level of understanding that can be achieved with this that our modern day science has verified and confirmed in a lot of ways. These are simple steps that were presented 120 years ago. And I also just want to say, like, this was a problem 120 years ago, and we certainly haven't gotten better about it here in the States, in the Western world in general. This has been a very big problem for a very long time. And it's obvious, because this was written 120 years ago, that we've had an issue with this type of stuff. We are still actively talking about it. We have actually progressed the complete wrong direction. We have not improved. It's gotten worse, right? The portion sizes are huge in the States. We eat many more meals than we need, and we call it snacking. But the reality of it is, like, we're eating small meals in between very, very overly sized large meals. And then we wonder why we can't seem to take weight off. We wonder why we can't seem to actually heal. We can't seem to actually address the things in our lives, right? So he talks about reducing the amount, addressing the portion size. Got it. Eating less meals throughout the day. That's what people are talking about too. Stop eating late even, right? And intermittent fasting's a thing now. It's always been a thing. We're just giving it a name and a practice and making it a fad, right? But it is effective. And then don't eat all these sweet and rich foods all the time. Simplify your diet. Schedule and simplify your diet, right? Simplify and structure your days and your diet. We don't need all of this really addictive flavors, addictive qualities, right? I guess I understand spices don't make something necessarily addictive, but when we're falling in love with the flavor of something that causes us to desire it in an unhealthy way, hey, maybe we should take a look at that. Maybe that needs to be used more in moderation, right? So we need to simplify these things, which is what we're talking about today, right? We've talked about that a ton today. So simplify and structure your diet. And that's why this first step was important, because you need to establish a better structure for your day, and eat less times, and don't be the victim of your selfish desire to overconsume and indulge in food. We need to start practicing these things. I've needed to start practicing these things. Rein in how much I'm eating in a day. Rein in how often I'm eating in a day. Take a look at why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Taking a look at why I'm in the kitchen, or why I'm taking that snack at work, or what I'm actually doing with my behaviors, right? It takes an honest appraisal of these things to really move forward. And then he goes further to say supper should be abolished, as they are altogether unnecessary and conduce to heavy sleep and cloudiness of mind. And again, this is referencing all late eating, all of it. And this is he's including dinners, suppers, like the last meal of the day. He's saying you don't even need that. Late night snacking, don't do it. Eating before or in bed. We already said you shouldn't be eating in bed. That doesn't help with your actual routine or structure of things, right? You have the wrong associations to bed, but don't eat before bed either, right? These are all things that are generally accepted today as healthy, right? The only one I would say people might struggle with is skipping the last meal of the day. But if you make the first two meals larger to get through your day, then skipping the last meal isn't that big of a deal, right? And especially for many of us, the last meal of the day is the largest. It's usually the most carb heavy. It's the most sugar heavy, because we have all this stress and we're like, I just want to feel good, and food is where we turn, right? So missing that last meal of the day, not always a bad thing. We put a lot of unhealthy behaviors in that last meal of the day, and we overeat at that last meal of the day for many, right? You go out to dinner and you're eating portion sizes on plates twice the size of your head. And we're wondering if we're going to be full at the end of it, right? Like these are really big problems we have about when it comes to our thinking, right? And even today, like he mentioned cloudiness of mind, like late eating influences and impacts not only our physical health, but our mental health with cloudiness of mind. The brain fog is what he's talking about here. This grogginess that people feel. And there's so much more information coming out today about the effect of like carbohydrates and sugars on the actual functionality and productivity of our thoughts and our memory throughout the day, how it drowns it, how it actually impedes our productivity when we have all of these sugars and carbs and all of these foods being digested and just being laying heavy on our bodies. Maybe that's the way to say it, right? We become sluggish, right? After you have a huge carb heavy meal, guess what you want to do? You want to go to take a nap. You don't want to go back to work. You don't want to go work out. You don't want to go do any of that stuff. We have to be very vigilant about what we're doing now. And there's science to back this up. I don't have any of the studies, but I do know that a lot of proven tests that have come forward that they've found that, certain foods actually don't help us think well. That certain eating patterns actually have an unhealthy impact on us, right? We get the brain fog. We have a lack of clarity when it comes to reason, right? And if you have a problem, and he said, conduce to heavy sleep. If you have a problem waking up in the morning and staying awake in the morning and being on time and this, that, the other thing, the thing that we were talking about last week, if you have a hard time getting up on time in the morning, maybe you should take a look at how we're eating the night before. Are you just eating a ton of food that's taxing your body, honestly, to digest overnight, right? What are you actually feeding yourself for fuel in the morning? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is it just sugary coping skills unhealthy coping skills that you're trying to just fight through every moment of every day with, that's really having a negative impact and it's compounding on top of one another, the impact of your the negative impact it's having on your health, right? If your mornings suck, if your next day sucks, you need to take a look at what you're doing the night before. Right? A good morning starts with a good evening, is the reality of it. Don't rob yourself of sleep and don't put things into your body that will cause you to have a rough morning. We set ourselves up for failure that way. And I think it's amazing this was written in 1904. It's amazing to me it was written in 1904. These are all of the same suggestions that people give when people are going on a diet. Eat less, eat healthier, don't eat the sugary enriched things, right? Don't even eat at night. Pretty straightforward things. But we've lost that understanding along the way, right? The solution is pretty much still the same overall, right? There's all these specific fad diets and this, that, the third. I understand that, right? But think about it. We're talking about eating organically. He's talking about a simple dietary, less processed food, a simple dietary, simple uninvolved dietary. We put less steps between the food and your table, right? That's what we're talking about here. Don't eat refined sugars, right? No processed food. Reduce your carbs, right? Your complex carbohydrates, right? Like reduce your portion size. This is all we're talking. That's what we're talking about today in the health world. That's what people are talking about today in the weight loss world. Besides all the chemicals you can just pump into your body to lose weight. Now, it completely defeats the purpose of a spiritual solution to help you regain your healthy body and healthy mind. Right? Let me just circumvent the entire process of change so we don't have to do the hard legwork. But it happens sometimes. So this same solution that James Allen has proposed here for overcoming self-indulgence, even though it's simple, this is only like 2 paragraphs long, this entry, but it is the exact same prescription that so many people get for weight loss in general. And that has worked for so many people. Right? So it's the same solution. It's just backed by science now. And he was bold enough to actually write it down, which I commend him for. And, I just said something about, people would just use medications now to get rid of it. And it kind of circumvents the actual need for a healthy, or it circumvents the object of changing your diet, which is to actually heal your mind and heal your heart and heal spiritually, right? We're trying to just fix the outside with outside things, and that doesn't really work for a lasting change. It just makes us dependent on something else. So he talks about that here. He says, as the sensual sin of self-indulgence is taken out of the mind, the right selection of foods will be instinctively and infallibly adapted to the purified mental condition. What this is speaking to is it's telling us that there's a problem with the way we think about food and the habits we have with food. If you're just taking something outside of you to force weight loss, and I understand it's really helped a lot of people, but there's something more you have to look at. You can't just stop there, right? The self-indulgence step and the gluttonous eating habits cause addictive behaviors and habits, right? And the body becomes normalized to these habits. The body won't feel satisfied on a healthy amount of food. We're used to overeating, right? So we feel like we're missing, like our brains can become addicted to sugar. It can become addicted to caffeine. It can become addicted to carbs, and we'll crave them like a drug. We'll crave them. We'll want them. We'll need them to some extent. Our brain will think that, at least, right? So we become a slave to the food we're eating. We become a slave to our own eating habits and our behaviors. And when we willfully put these new ways of living in and these restrictions into the way we live, right? And we take the more appropriate meal sizes and simple and uninvolved dietary and reduce the amount we're eating, right? Eventually, just like with drug addiction and alcoholism, the cravings will stop. The body will normalize and stabilize. And then when it does that, we're going to start to have a healthier relationship with food again, right? We're going to have a healthier understanding of why we eat and why we used to eat unhealthily, right? This will be something that changes on a very, very real mental and emotional level. And many people need that, really, at the end of the day. So, because most of us have used eating in an unhealthy way, we've used food in an unhealthy way. We've been misusing for selfish and pleasurable purposes, right? We've used it as an unhealthy coping skill, as validation, reward, or pleasure instead of appropriately eating for health and nourishment, right? We're supposed to eat to fuel our bodies, not comfort our mind and our ego, right? It's not the pursuit of pleasure through eating. It is the pursuit of nourishment and health that we eat. It's supposed to be fuel for this body, not a medicine. Well, let me change that. Not a chemical reward for living. The unhealthy, but after a while, the unhealthy cravings will go away. That's what we're talking about here, right? So it will be taken out of the mind. So all of the old associations we'd have with it, all the things we would use it to work or use it for in our lives, those will be taken out of the mind, right? We will begin to just be able to listen to our bodies in a healthy way and understand what it actually needs rather than what we just want to pump it full of because it makes us feel a certain type of way. Our bodies have a certain way of telling us what we need to do or what it's craving or what it's desiring and how to address it, but we won't actually get to that place if we keep pumping it full of all the same foods we always have and we're having the same behaviors we've always had, right? He's saying we will get a lot better with our dietary selections as long as we start to do these things. We'll change our relationship with food, which is so important for many. And then he gets down to, because that's addressing the mental part, but he says, this is what he closes it with. It should be well borne in mind that change of heart is the needful thing, and that any change of diet which does not subserve this end is futile. When one eats for enjoyment, he is gluttonous. The heart must be purified of sensory craving and gustatory lust. Remember, the goal is to change the heart. And the thoughts and behaviors are born from the heart to serve a purpose, right? Using it usually of a selfish and self-centered heart, right? Like I feel disconnected, I feel alone, I feel isolated, I'm sad, I'm grieving, I've lost somebody, I'm angry, whatever it might be. I'm disgruntled, I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontented with the world, I'm scared, fearful. We use it to medicate all of that, right? So that's what we hold in our heart, and that fuels the mind, and the mind then fuels the actions that we take. So the intention here has to be to change your heart. And trying to make these changes will not be effective if you're doing it for any other reason. Like if you're not doing it for the end goal to heal your soul, to heal your heart, and you're only doing it so you look good over the summer, if you're only doing it so you can get your doctor to stop yelling at you, right? If you're only doing it so you can just feel better about yourself in general, and not actually do the work to fix the underlying issues you've had with food the whole time, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stay. You might get some temporary relief or some temporary change that you enjoy, but the behaviors and the overall issue you have with food will not change. It will be a constant fight. And that constant fight you will eventually one day lose. You'll go back to it. You'll gain the weight back. You'll stop the healthy behaviors. You'll start eating the things you shouldn't be eating. And I know this because I've done it. I know this because sometimes I still struggle with it. And I'm actively working on this. I can tell you, I am actively working on this and trying to inventory and really break out like what's my reasoning for doing this stuff. And I've made a lot of progress on it, but I am not perfect. But if you realize, like, this is the process for all areas of life, right? You stop the physical behavior, you stop the actual action that is to be taken, you look at the thinking, then you go to try to change the thinking, or you do choose to change the thinking and choose different thoughts, and you see what's not being satisfied in your heart anymore. You'll see what those thoughts and actions used to address for you. And then guess what? You can go and find the healing and the love you need to correct that, usually through connecting to the God of your understanding, from finding that power from a power greater than yourself to actually connect to give you what you are seeking so emphatically outside of yourself in these things, and specifically in this instance, food. And that's where the true freedom is. That's where the true freedom is. Beautiful things, beautiful stuff. So that brings us to the end. That is the last step. Actually, that second step is the last step in the disciplines of the body. So, that completes the first lesson that James Allen gave us in this chapter, and we will be moving on to the next lesson next week, which is we're going to call it step 3, but it's really step 1 of lesson 2, which is about let me see, it's discipline of the tongue. Step 3 is overcoming slander and being slanderous of others, which is something we need to address today too. So I'm really looking forward to going through that with y'all. So please, thank you all so much for following along and subscribing and listening to this podcast. I am extremely grateful for it. And I look forward to going into step 3 with you next week. So until next time, thanks.